Hello, you're watching Everard Junction, and today we're going to take a sneak peek at the new Hattons Class 66. Hattons have very kindly sent me this pre-production sample of the forthcoming Class 66, and we're basically going to put a decoder in it and run it around the layout. This is just a sample, so it does not have the DCC sound fitted, that I know a lot of you are keen to get hold of. This is just a non-sound fitted example, which works perfectly for me, as that's what I typically operate on this layout. This is not a review, we're not going to be giving it a score out of 10, and we're not going to be drooling over the packaging. I'm going to take the body off, put a decoder in it, run it around the layout, and see what it's like. The Class 66 has a quite long and interesting history, so I will do my best to keep this relatively brief. So, it's 1996 and British Rail's freight operations have been privatised. The main player in the UK rail market now is English, Welsh and Scottish Railways, more commonly known as EWS. The company is controlled by Wisconsin Central Transportation Systems, and it's inherited most of BR's historic fleet of approximately 1,600 locomotives. The fleet consisted of classes 08, 20, 31, 33, 37, 47, 56, 58, 59, 60, 90 and 92. The 60 is the most modern of the diesel locomotives in the fleet, with high power and tractive effort. Most examples are no more than 6 years old. Secondly, you have the Class 59, developed for Foster Yeoman in 1986 due to ongoing frustrations over BR's poor availability with locos. Most of these locomotives are all first-generation diesels, with their development stemming from the 1955 modernisation plan, and they make up the bulk of the fleet. Most of these units are now 30 years old or more, and are high on engine hours and generally tired out. BR has been in the process of retiring these, with many examples having already been withdrawn by the early 90s. A number, now under EWS ownership, have been cannibalised for spares and will never run again. They are simply rusting hulks. Despite their charm and character, these locos are expensive to maintain and not particularly reliable by modern standards. For example, the 47 had an availability of 65% and was expected to fail or need mechanical attention every 16 days in service. It requires an extensive overhaul every 7 years that at the time cost £400,000. This is not good for business. BR was striding to modernise the fleet in the late 80s, but only got so far with locos like the 58 and 60. Even the 58s are 10 years old by this time. The answer to the problem faced by EWS came in the shape of the garden shed. That shed was the Class 66. Developed in part from the earlier and highly successful Class 59, EWS sought to echo what Yeoman Aggregates had done a decade earlier, introduce a reliable, powerful and cost-effective freight locomotive. The 59 was designed and built by EMD, which is a division of General Motors. EWS approached EMD and was offered an updated version that would be housed in basically the same body shell as the previous Class 59. The new general purpose Class 66 would have less power and different gearing to enable it to cruise at higher speeds than the Class 59. Power at the rail was 3,000 horsepower with a top speed of 75 miles an hour. Other improvements were also added to the design, including a new type of bogie that allowed for increased traction and less rail wear. Time was critical as BR's ageing fleet cost more and more to operate with each day. As such, many features from the Class 59, such as the cab layout, was carried over. The first locomotive arrived in Britain in June 1998. Each locomotive was guaranteed 95% availability, aiming for a minimum of 180 days between mechanical failures, and it was also designed to provide 18 years of service between major overhauls. The class quickly took over many rail duties on the UK network and helped to keep the UK rail freight industry competitive, proving that it could deliver the goods on time and on budget. Over the years, there were several builds of 66 for various companies. Over that time, 455 units were manufactured, and most of these serve in the UK, with others serving in other European countries. Emissions regulations prohibit any further builds of the Class 66, with the last units being built in 2013. Although a number of enthusiasts dislike the 66 as it displaced many of those classic BR designs, you cannot deny that the 66 is a highly effective locomotive, and given the situation EWS found themselves in during 1996, it is understandable why they placed such a large order. Let's take a look at the model. This particular unit represents one of the first batch of 250 Class 66s, which was delivered to EWS between 1998 and 2001. Before we get started, I shall remove the body shell from the model, partly so we can have a look inside, and also so I can fit one of my decoders. As this is a pre-production sample, it does not have a decoder currently fitted. To remove the body, it is relatively straightforward. It's held in by 2 clip points. There are no screws, but I will stress that you have to be very careful with the details here, 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 and there. These details are attached to the side of the body, and you need to be very careful when the body is lifted off so that you don't damage anything. Some small scraps of plasticard like these are ideal for this sort of job. Here you can see the details I've mentioned. You need to be careful so not to damage those. They are made of quite flexible plastic. So there we have the body removed, and as you can see, it's the traditional setup. So we have a large motor in the centre of the locomotive, and that drives 2 gearboxes mounted atop each bogie, which then in turn drive all of the wheels. Here you can see we've got various dip switches for controls of the model's lighting features, so that those of you who are using DC or decoders with not too many functions, you can set some of the lighting features up manually, such as turning tail lights off and stuff like that. It's worth mentioning that there is also similar switches underneath the model on the bottom of the chassis. The manual for the model details which one of these does what. So at the front we have the lighting pack, which then shines through this section on the front of the body to illuminate the various lights on the front of the model. We also have some contactor pads on a PCB just there, which contact on top of the cab just there, presumably for additional lighting features. Main circuit board, which has the decoder socket and the motor underneath. Huge provision for a speaker for DCC sound. And then the same arrangement at the far end. My sample has the full valance at one end and a tension lock coupler at the other end, which is nice. I typically like to have a fully detailed front end on my locomotives, and to have that straight out of the box saves you faffing around with the detailing pack. A partial valance for fitting a coupler at both ends is supplied in the box, and you also get a full valance if you want maximum detail at both ends of the unit. I shall be fitting a lens silver 21-pin decoder, as it's what I have in stock, and then we can get it running on the layout. As you would expect for a new model, it has NEM pockets, so it's a mere matter of 10 seconds to change out that tension lock coupler for a KD, so that the loco can haul some of my stock. Before we get started, let's just quickly take a look at a little bit of the lighting control. The decoder I fitted does not really have enough function outputs on it to fully utilise the lighting controls, but we can have a play nonetheless. So using this lens decoder, I have control over the marker lights and the headlight, as you can see illuminated on the middle left-hand side of the bank of 6. I can also turn on the tail lights, and by using the switches in here, I can also swap the headlight from one side to the other to represent night running. It's very nice being able to turn on and off the tail lights from the controller, something I wish a lot of my older models would be able to do. So I'll put the body back on and we'll take a proper look. The 66 negotiated my relatively simple track plan with no problems at all at both high and low speeds, and the model's good weight allowed it to pull my heaviest trains no trouble at all. It also had no problems negotiating the super elevation I have on the ceiling part of the layout. no problems negotiating the complex point work in this section of the main lines, although I did observe some of the detail does catch ever so slightly on bogey movement, so it'll be interesting to see how well some of the details fare in the long term. If you listen carefully in the next clip, you'll just about be able to hear the clicking of what I believe to be the sandpipes just catching ever so slightly on the bogey. Didn't have any problems during the few hours I ran the model, but it'd just be something to bear in mind. Set track point work and curves in the fiddle yard also presented no trouble, with the model quite happily hurtling through it at a scale 75 miles an hour. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. I certainly enjoyed making it. It's not every day you get a chance to run something that hasn't hit the shops yet around the layout, and it performed very well. Highlights for me include the rotating axle boxes, the very high level of detail in the cab, the crazy amounts of underframe detail, the excellent lighting that allows for precise control of realistic lighting patterns, the very crisp application of the livery. I couldn't really see any tampo printing or painting errors on it. The mechanism was also particularly smooth and offers great low speed performance. The only criticisms I can come up with are the presence of a driver. Wouldn't go amiss in the cab. Does look a little bit empty in the front of that thing. And the amount of detail on this model is so great, you do have to be particularly careful when taking the body off or handling it. If you're a bit rough with your model trains, or your model trains tend to see a lot of action or get moved around quite a lot, this model may not be the best purchase for you. It is quite fragile in a number of places due to all those separately fitted parts. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll be back as soon as I can building the interior for this office building. If you'd like to see more, then feel free to head over to New Junction, where Richard has managed to get his hands on a Freightliner liveried example. Hattons themselves also have a number of videos covering the locomotive on their own channel, and there's a link in the video description where you can take a look at the various liveries that are on offer.